This review will cover using pronouns correctly, including nominative and objective case uses, incomplete constructions, and clear pronoun reference. At the end, there will also be a review of the parts of speech graphic organizer, as well as the noun and pronoun functions graphic organizer. With nominative case pronouns such as I, he, she, we, and they, we use these pronouns as either subjects or predicate nominatives. Consider this example. Told is an action verb. Who told? I told. I is the subject. Would win is an action verb. Who would win? We would win. Let's take a closer look at what's going on in a sentence with two verbs. That we would win is what is called a subordinate clause. Told is an action verb. Told what? That we would win. This is a noun clause acting as the direct object. To whom did I tell that we would win? John. That is the indirect object. The whole clause is acting as the direct object, but within that clause, the verb needs its subject. The following example has a linking verb, is. The subject of that linking verb is this. Therefore, he is the predicate nominative. Remember, the sentence, it is I, is correct because is a linking verb, it is the subject, and therefore we need a nominative case pronoun for that predicate nominative. Objective case pronouns, on the other hand, me, him, her, us, and them, are used as direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of the preposition. Consider this sentence. John called her at noon. Called is an action verb. John is the subject. At noon is a prepositional phrase. Called who? Called her. Direct object uses objective case pronoun. Here's a sentence with a clause. We still don't know what caused them. Do know is our first verb. Caused is the second verb. Subject of do know is we. Still is an adverb, telling to what extent you know. Do know is an action verb. Do know what? What caused them? What is the subject? Caused is an action verb. Them is the direct object. So I want you to stop and think about that. Within the clause, you have a direct object. Then the clause itself is a noun clause acting as the direct object. Remember, noun clauses can do anything a noun can do. That brings us to the next idea. When you are trying to determine the correct usage of a pronoun in a clause, you should follow these steps, both for the pronouns who and whom, as well as any other nominative or objective case pronoun. The first thing you should do is find and isolate the subordinate clause. Then decide within the clause how the pronoun is being used. If it's a subject or a predicate nominative, it will use a nominative case pronoun. So after you decide how the pronoun is being used, you determine the case and then select the correct pronoun. For example, let's look at the following sentence. She knows who called. First things first, let's find those verbs. Knows and called. Who knows? She knows. Who called? Who called? Here's my clause. We use the nominative case pronoun because who is the subject of called. But let's extend our thinking further. Knows is an action verb. Knows what? Knows who called. The noun clause itself is acting as a direct object. Following the steps is important because you need to first isolate that clause and determine the function of your pronoun inside the clause. Then you can determine what the clause is doing. Let's take another example. She will give a prize to blank runs quickly. Will give is the verb, she is the subject. Will give is an action verb. Runs is an action verb. Let's go back and see what the story is on will give. Will give what? A prize. Prize is the direct object. So now I have this clause, and in that clause I need a subject for that verb. So the correct answer here is whoever. Whoever is a nominative case pronoun. Whomever is an objective case pronoun. So this is the subject. My clause is here, whoever runs quickly. The function of that clause is the object of the preposition. So the function of the clause is less important than what the pronoun is doing inside the clause. Conversely, I could say she knows about whom the letter was written. Start with those verbs. Knows, was written. Who knows? She knows. What was written? The letter was written. So now I have to look at the sentence more closely. My verb already has a subject, but this preposition needs an object. So whom is the object of the preposition, and my clause would start here, and my prepositional phrase would be inside my clause. So in the previous example, the clause itself was the object of the preposition. Here, the word is the object of the preposition. The most important thing to remember is that if you have a clause, that verb needs a subject. That comes first. Then you can start looking at what else might the word be doing inside the clause. But follow those steps. Find the clause, then decide how your pronoun is used within the clause so that you can determine the case and select the correct pronoun. When dealing with a pronoun in an incomplete construction, you're really talking about a comparison. When you have the words than and as introducing a comparison, what you do is think about how the pronoun would be used if the comparison were completed. So what you do is write out the sentence. Make sure that you use the same verb at the end of the sentence that you did in the beginning. Let's take a look at a sentence like, I am as tall as she. Am is the verb. I is the subject. If I were to finish that up, it would say, I am as tall as she is tall. She is the subject of is. In a sentence like, John throws a football better than he, the construction would be completed better than he throws a football. The word him, if I said John throws a football better than him, I would be saying something completely different. I would be saying John throws a football better than John throws him, which doesn't make any sense. So when you have a pronoun in an incomplete construction, you complete the construction by including a verb in the second half or comparative part of the sentence. As I explained in class, clear pronoun reference is a writing issue and should be treated as such. What you're trying to do with clear pronoun reference is reword the sentence so that it makes sense and all pronouns are clear. In the example, my uncle called my brother after he won the marathon. He is not clearly referring back to either the brother or the uncle, so we have to fix that. We could say, after my uncle won the marathon, he called my brother. He is clearly referring to uncle as an antecedent. After my brother won the marathon, my uncle called him. Him is clearly referring back to brother as the antecedent. This is a very common issue as well. Let's explore the grammar in a sentence like, in the textbook, it explains how cells divide. In the textbook is a prepositional phrase. Explains is a verb. It is the subject. We also have a clause in this sentence. It needs an antecedent. What is the antecedent of it? Well, it's unclear. It may be the textbook. Well, in that case, there's no reason to use in the textbook as a prepositional phrase modifying it, because you've basically got it referring back to textbook and then in the textbook modifying it. The sentence would be complete by saying the textbook explains how cells divide. So remember, when you're dealing with unclear pronoun reference, your job is to rewrite the sentence to make it clear. Let's conclude this review by going back to the very beginning of our grammar instruction. At the very beginning of the year, we looked at a parts of speech pyramid. And on the bottom of that pyramid, we had nouns and pronouns, as well as verbs. We layered on modifiers. Adjectives were here because they modify nouns and pronouns. Adverbs were on this side because they modify verbs, adjectives, and themselves. This is true of single words, clauses, and phrases. Let's take the example, the blue car. Since car is a noun and blue is describing it, blue is an adjective. If I added a phrase, the car in the driveway, the same concept is true. In the driveway is describing the car, therefore it's an adjective because adjectives modify nouns. If I said the car that is in the driveway, I have added a subject and a verb to my modifier. That makes it a clause. I'm going to put brackets around my clause. Here's my verb, here's my subject. That clause is still describing the car, therefore it is an adjective. So adjectives modify nouns and pronouns no matter what, whether they are single words, whether they are phrases, or whether they are clauses. The same will hold true of an adverb. If I said, she ran quickly. Ran is a verb, she is the subject. Quickly is telling me how she ran. If it's answering how and modifying a verb, it's an adverb. If I said she ran to the car, I've added a phrase. Ran is my verb. To the car is telling where she ran. If it's answering where and modifying a verb, it's an adverb. If I said she ran because she was fast, I've added a subject and a verb, therefore I have a clause. This clause is saying why she ran. It's answering why, modifying a verb, therefore it is an adverb. So the same concepts that we talked about in the early part of the year about modifiers will hold true whether you're talking about one word, a phrase, or a clause. The other graphic organizer that's worthwhile reviewing is the functions of nouns and pronouns. So a noun or a pronoun can be used as a subject, as a predicate nominative, as a direct object, an indirect object, or as the object of the preposition. This is important when we're talking about clauses and pronouns. We went through that subjects and predicate nominatives use nominative case pronouns, while the objects use objective case pronouns. But let's consider also noun clauses. Let's look at a sentence such as, she bakes what we like. She bakes cookies. In the second sentence, bakes is the verb, she is the subject, Bakes is an action verb. Bakes what? Bakes cookies. The same concept is going to apply in the sentence above. Bakes is the verb, she is the subject. What's different is that like is a verb, and it has a subject. Therefore, we bracket that off as a clause. But it doesn't change the rest of the sentence. Bakes is still an action verb. Bakes what? Bakes what we like. This is a noun clause acting as a direct object. So whether it's a single word or whether it's a clause, nouns are subjects, predicate nominatives, dos, ios, and objects of the preposition. Doesn't matter if it's a single word or whether it's a clause.